So just welcome everybody again tonight to tonight's Petaluma Riverside chat. And our special guest is Dr. Glenn Brassington, and he's going to be speaking with us tonight about sports psychology. And before we get into his chat, I just want to share a few changes about the Petaluma Riverside chats and a bit about the upcoming chat schedule. Going forward, hold on one sec here. Going forward, the Petaluma Riverside chat videos will be accessible to the public via YouTube. So that means you can subscribe and people will be able to access all these wonderful speakers, that'll be out in the public. People can get a hold of their information. The channel's name is Petaluma Riverside Chat, and I posted a link to it in the Zoom chat tonight, so you can go ahead get it from there. And it's just a way of leveraging the public-facing YouTube channel to provide a broader platform to attract guest speakers and allowing their work and contribution to be more accessible, with the potential of enhancing viewers' knowledge of rowing, the Petaluma River watershed, and what's going on in the greater Petaluma River community. For convenience, I will also continue to post video links for those that are North Bay Rowing Club members here tonight on the TeamSnap media file, so you can access that information there as well. And then also, I just want to just give a little heads up to, of course, there are privacy implications. And with that said, with the videos being public and all virtual participation is public, the questions, comments, etc., everything will be recorded and publicly available. So, for future chats, if you don't wish to be recorded, you can watch live with your video and microphone off. And then, if you would like, you can submit questions to me in advance via email, and also post your questions and such in the chat. Regarding the upcoming chat schedule, our next one will be with U.S. National Team Coxswain at Lucas Conwell this coming Tuesday, December 8th at 5 p.m. And my co-host will be Julia Kiefer, which is pretty cool. It'll be fun. And we've needed to reschedule the U.S. National Team Kendall Chase's talk for mid-January, which were originally scheduled for mid-December. And the upside of this change is that some of her teammates will be able to join us during the session as well, since the team will be training in their Chula Vista bubble at the time down in Southern California. And then early January, Felix Mullebach, the captain of Chaos Rowing, who's here tonight with us, has generously arranged and will co-host a panel discussion on January 6th on the topic of rhythm from the perspective of our guests, Rowing Australia coach Andrew Randall, internationally renowned applied sports biomechanist Connie Draper, and professional athlete and gold medalist Olivia Coffey. So other confirmed but yet to be scheduled chats will be with the Petaluma Small Craft Center, Friends of the Petaluma River, SSU professor Nicole Myers on the geological origins and evolution of the Petaluma watershed. And again, as always, feel free to contact me for more details and suggestions for possible topics and speakers for this venue. And then if you'd like, take a moment right now and you can, in the chat, you can put in the group you're affiliated with and your location, just as a way for everybody else to see, who's logged in tonight. And then also just a reminder, I believe we've got such a small group here tonight that at the end for question and answers, if people would like to unmute and ask your question, that would be great. Or if you'd like to put it in the chat and I can ask it for you, that's good too. So without further ado, I'm personally very excited to have our guest with us tonight. I met Glenn last year at a school gathering and had a spontaneous, very meaningful and delightful conversation about his work in sports psychology and coaching and rowing in general. And I thought, we need to get him to talk with us rowings. And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming our guest, Dr. Glenn Brassington. And welcome, Glenn. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Jessica, for having me. I'm living in the South Bay for a long while and commuting up to Sonoma State. And just a few years ago, I moved up here. So it's nice to make some connection with folks in North Bay. And it looks like also folks in the South. So that's great. I'm going to share a few slides with you, if I could, just to kind of keep us a little on track. Plus, I have a couple of audio clips in there that I wanted to play for you. So if you could accept the screen, you should be able to see my slides.
Yep.
That looks okay to you?
Yep.
All right, so let's see if I maximize it. You should be able to see the first one. Does that look great?
Yep, looks great.
All right, great. I know it's a little hard sometimes to see me and where I'm looking. I'll try to look a little bit toward you as best I can, but feel free to ask me questions. You might have to send something in the chat to Jessica if you want me to stop for a second, because it's hard. I won't be able to see you put your hand up if your screen's on, but feel free to get my attention in any way you want. So kind of to begin, since we have an Australian there, I wanted to let you know I'm originally from Australia, and I came over to the US when I was 16 to play tennis in college. So I was really interested in ways in which I could improve my tennis game. And so I was back in the day playing tennis, picture of me, just in case you don't believe me, back in the day in front of one of the old tennis players' books. And so I thought today I would just spend a little bit of time talking to you about what we do in sports psychology in terms of trying to enhance performance. Trying to move my screen over here so I can see you maybe a little bit better. And give you a few tips, a few things that you can use, and then take your questions. I mean, and ideas that you have in terms of how you might apply some of these things. I teach a 16-week, 4 hours a week course in sports psychology, and I have to whittle that down a little bit into 45 minutes together. So bear with me. I'll try to hit on a few things that I think might be most helpful to you as we go along. So people, know a lot about physical training, and in some parts of the world, people have been more interested in the mental, but it's really only been in the last number of decades that we've started putting more attention on mental training as we have with physical training. There really are three legs to the stool in my mind that make a great performer, and that's the great coaching, technical ability, physical training for agility, speed, balance, and then the mental game. So in mental training, what we're looking at doing, sports psychologists like me do lots of different things. They help athletes that have, mental problems or substance use and alcohol problems. But what we do when we focus in the mental skills area is that we're helping people create on demand the psychophysiological state for practice or performance, or what you're all familiar with, probably the term being in the zone. And so what does that look like? We kind of need to know what we're focused on doing in mental training, and we need to communicate that to people in the public, because most people say, well, what do? Do you sit on the couch? Do you counsel people? I don't need someone to hold my hand. We really are trying to help people create this state that you see here, where you're mentally relaxed, physically relaxed, confident, optimistic, focused on the present and the essential. There are a lot of people talk about just being in the moment, but I think we know that to perform well, you can't only be in the present. You have to think of what your actions, the effect they'll have in the future, and you have to look at how they were affected in the past, in terms of performance. So, but on the essential factors, appropriately aroused, energized, having extraordinary awareness, not being afraid of failure or success. Really elite athletes are, can be in that boat more so than less elite athletes, where they become nervous when they think of being successful. Being in control, trusting one's mind and body, kind of having the integration of mind and body, and having fun. So we kind of look at that as the target, and that state, was kind of somewhat coined. People have thought of flow over time, but it's really started being researched a lot in the 1980s by Csikszentmihalyi, and he kind of has a little definition of the state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. Now, if you think about boiling down this state a little bit, you can think about it as really being able to dial in three components. So dialing in focus. So when I work with athletes, and I've worked with athletes now for maybe the last 25 years, and being an athlete before that, has been to have athletes teach me what are the key points of focus before and at the milestones during a performance, and then after they need to gather information about how they did. So what's the optimal focus? So we're constantly trying to dial in our attention. Should we be reflecting internally on what's happening in our body, or should we be focused externally on executing say a pull in the boat, or focusing on the next piece that we need to do in our performance? So identifying where your focus needs to be throughout a performance, being confident, so being able to create confidence emotionally, so that feeling of energy, pumped up this depending on the time in the performance, and then being as physically calm as possible. So all of you have probably had that experience as rowers where everything's just, you were moving the boat quickly and it seemed like you were just in a flow. You were using less muscle than the day before. It's that sense of like being able to dial in muscle tension. So, practices like Tai Chi and that you see in the East, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Some of my background in the Eastern approach is to learn subtle differences in body tension, in muscle changes that you can kind of harness to help your performance. And so we help people a little bit bridge what we call this gap between intention and action. So good example is you're performing and you feel your heart rate increase too much. You start getting anxious, you're trying too hard, you're worried about a performance before or during, and you intend to relax. And you tell yourself, relax, and nothing happens. And you just even more insistently say relax. The mental training is about making that intention to relax more powerful. So it's analogous to lifting weights. If you go to the gym and you do a bicep curl, you curl your bicep and you can't lift the weight. You're not strong enough. You intend to lift it, you can't lift it. But with practice, you can actually be better able to lift that weight. And the same thing is if we, hook you up to some biofeedback equipment, we put electrodes on your shoulders and your forehead, and we ask you to relax. Initially, you won't get very much change in that electrical activity, but with practice, with doing a couple of the drills to talk about tonight, you can learn to have kind of exquisite changes in muscle tension. So like fine changes in muscle tension. So some of the origins of this training, and I'll kind of just let you know what a 10-week type program would be for someone. The origins come from this Eastern kind of wisdom. So we've heard about people and, doing kind of amazing things in the East that seem supernatural. Most of those things are because of extensive mental training. So they've practiced being able to do those things. The Tibetan monks that were tested in the 70s and 80s to be able to sleep out in the snow on the coldest night of the year in Tibet with shorts and a t-shirt, so to speak, comes from years of being able to manipulate their metabolism. So Buddhism, yoga, Taoism, the Tai Chi, Qigong, Aikido, these were areas of interest to me, from when I was a teenager, wanting to find ways to do tennis better. And then I started moving into the more sciences. And so we have in the kind of clinical psychology area, information about behavior change and challenging cognitions and those kind of things. In health psychology, how sleep affects performance. I have a chapter I'll share with you sometime if you're interested about the impact of sleep on athletic performance, and how, many times I give an hour talk on sleep to a team and they do 5% better. And it's a pretty cheap intervention. If you can get people to sleep a little bit more, they will tend to be more focused and better, more resilient when they're competing. Neuroscience now, we have a little more information about the brain. It's still a little bit of a black box. We don't have, great measures of real-time changes in the brain during performance for high motor skill activities. A lot of those studies were done with activities where you don't have to move as much, like target shooting, for instance, or making a karate chop. But neuroscience we kind of draw from, and then the sports psychology literature. Okay, so pretty much the overview to give you an idea about what this is like is we start off working with somebody with a, with an individual or a group, and we describe that optimal performance state like I just did with you. And then people realize, okay, this is a state that I want to get to. I'm just not sure how to do it. I got really interested in this work, I think, after I met some Olympic athletes who would talk about just hoping that they went into the zone after 4 years of training. Well, that's not great to invest 4 years of your life and hope you wake up in the right mental state to perform. And now we know we can train people over those years to be more likely to turn on that state. So we increase the likelihood that people will have a peak performance. We can't force it. If it was that easy, we would all just decide, I will have a peak performance, and we would. So we then learn techniques to focus the mind, create confidence and positive emotions, which you can do, and then calm the body and the mind. And we tailor those techniques and then practice the techniques and create a personalized mental training program. And so it looks a little bit like this over time. And the reason I'm telling you about this, the overview, is not so much only to tell you about, what we do, but so that you can get an idea about what you could do. So what we start off with is increasing awareness and cultivating a sense of acceptance so that people can get closer to their experience. One of the things that happens very frequently with performers is when things don't go well, the last thing they want to do is spend time close to that state they were in. But you need to become more aware so that you know what's happening to you, so you know where to make changes. And acceptance is really important. It doesn't mean you like that you got angry or you focused on, losing in the middle of a race. It's becoming able to kind of include that and understand it better. Identifying values, goal setting, and creating action plans, especially now with like the Corona time. For people, it's really easy to lose confidence in their ability to move forward. So good goal setting, breaking things into small pieces, having daily successes is really important at this time. Identifying the optimal state, as I mentioned, and maybe in the next week or so, depending on the time you have. Building motivation, so making it really clear what the why is. Right now, again, this can be a difficult part of the work, because people will be like, well, why am I doing this mental training? I need to be out in the boat. I need to be doing more things. And so we need to build that motivation with folks. And then we work with people's behaviors, then how they're thinking. And then after that, we move into how they're responding to the environment and using the environment to enhance their performance. And all of this comes together in pre-performance rituals or routines. So ultimately this work, you should be able to, or any performer, to go backwards that millisecond before you start your race and have a routine that will predictably get you into a focused, confident, and calm state. And that's really doable with training. I've seen people say the big problem they have is that it's not predictable, but it really can be. And if you learn to modify, the last things here are overcoming errors and setbacks. But if you look at the areas that we try to intervene in, whoops, sorry, my screen's kind of split, so I can't see my slides very well. We have people work with their cognitions, so develop cognitive strategies, their behaviors, and the environment. And so by doing that, we train people to create that state more predictably. And what we want to do in the performance psychology is to put the responsibility onto the individual in the mental training to be able to create that performance state. So although there are social factors, environmental factors, the things we do in mental training specifically is get the person to focus back on themselves and have that be where the locus of control is. And so there's a little Sufi story that I like that I'll read to you that illustrates that a little bit. Bayezid, a Sufi mystic, has written in his autobiography, "When I was young, I thought and I said to God, and in all my prayers, this was the base. Give me energy so that I can change the whole world. Everybody looked wrong to me. I was a revolutionary and I wanted to change the face of the earth. When I became a little more mature, I started praying, this seems to be too much. Life is going out of my hands. Almost half of my life is gone and I have not changed a single person and the whole world is too much. So I said to God, my family will be enough. Let me change my family. And when I became old, says Bayezid, I realized that even the family is too much and who am I to change them? Then I realized that if I can change myself, that will be enough. More than enough. I prayed to God. Now I have come to the right point. At least allow me to do this. I would like to change myself. And God replied, now there is no time left. This you should have asked in the beginning. Then there was a possibility. So the idea for this kind of training is to bring ourselves back to what we can control as performers. And so not that the other factors aren't important, but the focus that we have here is on self-regulation and self-management. So I just want to share 3 components to that training with you tonight to get you thinking a little bit about them and leaving hopefully a little time for, I hope, for some questions. Is the pace okay? I could pause for a second because it's sometimes hard to ask questions, but it's okay. All right.
Yeah, it's great, I think.
Okay. So increasing awareness and cultivating acceptance. We'll look a little bit at arousal and performance, and then performance routines. Ultimately, I would say the most important structure, schema, way of organizing mental training is around performance routines. So you learn these different techniques that we do, but ultimately you want to be able to take the time before you start and create that state and be able to create it during your performance. So in terms of increasing awareness and cultivating acceptance, we think about awareness as being a first step to gaining control in any pressure situation. So the athlete must check in and determine if his or her arousal level, emotional state, thought processes, and focus are where they need to be, and if not, adjust them to get the best possibility for success. So in order to do that, we need to become aware of our own ideal performance state and routine behaviors that you're already using to achieve the state. So it's really important that when you work with someone, with a sports psychologist or a mental training coach, that they learn from you what you've done before that's been successful. So I'm, not a content expert in rowing. I've worked with some of our US rowing Olympians and a couple of other younger athletes in rowing, but I'm not an expert at all in that area. I know some things about movement and I coach tennis at a high level, but I've worked with many, many different athletes. And the nice thing is I don't tell them what to do. I ask them questions so that they can harvest what they have done best. So when you look back, and we're going to do a little best performance imagery exercise tonight, you want to identify the thoughts that you had, the imagery you used, the way you moved your body, where you focused in the environment when you were performing more in the zone. And then what we do is we take those and consciously use them to create that state again. One of the difficulties, as you might already be surmising, is that when we're performing really well, oftentimes we're not very conscious of what we're doing. We're just doing it. So the mental training really is about raising our awareness. So even the next time you're performing or training, when you can get out on the water, is start to notice what's going through my mind. How am I acting? How do the oars feel in my hands? How are my shoulders? What am I doing? So actually be able to have a better understanding of the things you're doing that you're just not aware of, that you could bring into those routines, taking responsibility then for your own physiological state. Most people focus too much on the results and not enough on the process that will make them successful. Now, this is where focused a little bit tonight on the mental process. So many people will say, oh, I want to focus on the physical. I get that. But mentally, they're like, I just want to focus. I want to get to focus. I want to get to confidence. But you need to look at the things that will create the conditions for that. And I use that language intentionally. We have certain kind of thoughts. We bring certain kind of thoughts to the table, certain behaviors, certain focus to create the conditions to go into the zone state. We can't just force ourselves to go into that state. Unfortunately, that would be too easy. So that's a little bit about thinking about increasing awareness. So I have athletes, keep journals, record insights they have right after a performance. Have a journal that anytime you notice a connection between something you think, imagine, do, or focus on, and a positive mental state, and hence a positive performance, note those things, capture them, and then the goal is to embellish them, to make those richer and more in the forefront of your mind. Now, when you're not being able to be on the water as much and training, some of that can get lost and is not so automatically triggered by those settings. That's when we have to do that a little bit more virtually. But the time not being able to practice oftentimes can be a time to reflect more and harvest those insights. So talk a little bit about arousal in performance. Arousal in the sports psychology is referred to as its energizing function that's responsible for harnessing the body's resources for activity. It's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's the level of energy that's associated with you being more in the zone for your performance. Before, you might be more relaxed in terms of your emotions and a little more calm. You might have stronger emotions during the performance and less after, but it's understanding that it's not important just to be relaxed or to be really energized. It's finding that balance and turning things on and off at the right time. So we use this kind of I like to use this yin yang. And in the East, they call it the yin yang symbol, not the yin and yang, because they're supposed to happen together, right? And so that most of you, I'm sure, have heard of the fight or flight response. That's the sympathetic part of your nervous system that turns on the energy. It's great. I've given a number of talks to physician groups over the years, and people say, I've never heard anyone be so positive about stress and the fight or flight response. But it's great. It's what gets us excited and connected to our performance. Without that, we wouldn't really get out of bed in the morning. That's why our blood pressure slightly goes up early in the morning, because that's a time for us to get going, and it goes down a little bit at night so we can sleep. But we have on the other side, the parasympathetic or relaxation response. And that balance is really the key to not only performance, but to health as well. So I just want to kind of briefly go through what's happening in your body with the fight or flight response, because the goal here is for you to manipulate this great mechanism. That's what we teach people to do, is to learn to turn on the sympathetic when you need it and turn it off when you don't. Turn on the parasympathetic when you need it and turn it off when you don't. So most of you have probably had that experience of, I mentioned before, that flow state when you're in the boat and you're pulling and it's going really well. You're only tensing just the muscles you need to do the activity and none of the other muscles. And on a not good day, the shoulders may get more tense and the jaw gets tense. So that sympathetic response is more geared to fighting, like actually fighting an animal, than it is to performing a motor skill in an athletic event. So fight or flight response, if there was more time, I would ask you all to participate more. So I'll try to just get through this a little bit so I can take some questions, and won't ask you to hypothesize about why we have these. I'll just kind of put it out there. But it is kind of nice to think. Your pupils dilate. So if you're attacked by a tiger, so to speak, your pupils dilate to let more light in. Okay, so that's why people will say, well, I know that person's lying if their pupil is really big and we're in a brightly lit room. Well, what it means is that they're stressed, and pupillometry is the study of pupil dilation under different environmental circumstances. And we know that you're being more stressed. Saliva is reduced, your mouth becomes dry. You don't need to digest food, especially if you've tasted something toxic, when you put something in your mouth. And so saliva is the first step of breaking that down. So you'll notice that you'll get dry mouth, or if somebody's not very used to giving, speeches, people will give them bottles of water. They need to keep drinking water because their mouth gets dry. This is an indicator that your arousal level is going up. Increased perspiration. Oh, another little, I always like to mention a little old story. In China, in past centuries, people would put a pebble in their mouth. Well, they'd be asked to in a court of law. And if the pebble went dry, then that meant they were lying. And again, you can see why these indicators, all of what you're seeing on the screen, are the way we measure, the way lie detectors measure people, and why they're not admissible in court. Because if you do the training, you cannot respond to some of those questions in the way that would be typical of somebody who was nervous when they were lying. If you're able to be calm. Increased perspiration. When I was a kid, I played rugby in Australia growing up, and we used to put, Vaseline on our legs. Well, increased perspiration makes it harder for you to be grabbed hold of, as well as cooling your body down. But so you'll notice that that your underarms, your hands may perspire more. Large skeletal muscles contract, so the neck and shoulders and back. That's so that you look bigger and you protect these arteries that are going up to your brain, really important arteries. If you were to get bitten, so in animals that will attack the neck, you want to keep down. If you've seen boxers will keep their chin down and their arm up. So the neck and the jaw are protected. That tends to be one of our first things. It's probably the most common skeletal muscle response that inhibits performance for most people, is they raise their shoulders up and they lose fluid movement in their arms. And you've probably noticed that in the boat. If you're really tight, instead of pulling back with your elbows, people will tell me they're pulling up with their shoulders more than they should. Great adaptation, for survival. Not so good if it's turned on too much for athletic performance. Increased respiratory rate, so you're breathing faster and shallower. Increased heart rate and blood pressure. Liver releases glycogen. So, I've done public speaking challenges in the lab to get people anxious. They're not very fun for people, but you get people to speak in public on the spur of the moment. That really changes their stress response. And you can see their blood sugar level go up, right? We have an epidemic of type 2 diabetes now, a lot related to, diet and lack of exercise. But I also think there's a component of stress that impacts the body that we don't hear as much about. Digestion, ovulation, immune function decreases. That's why, people have lots of GI, gastrointestinal issues when they're stressed or anxious about things for a prolonged period of time. I should mention that, this mechanism was designed to work for a few minutes, maybe an hour, a few hours. But when it's turned on too much, it causes these kind of difficulties. You don't want to, ovulate, conceive a child if it's a threatening world to come into. That's why oftentimes people who are trying to conceive are stressed and are not able to, when they stop trying, sometimes people report that then they're more able to do that. Blood is diverted from the extremities, so that's where you get the cold hands. So in biofeedback training that we do for people related, if we do it in the sports setting, we get people to warm their hands, because if you get cut, you're less likely to bleed out. And so those cold fingers and hands are an indication that you've moved blood from the extremities to stop getting cuts and moving it to big muscles. The muscles, if you're going to flee, will be the legs. And if you're angry, muscles, if you get really angry, that blood tends to go up to the upper body. So it actually has a different signature. Someday, with more research and being able to image some of this, we should be able to see blood flow and neurological activity related to discrete emotions. But right now, it looks like if you're angry, blood goes to your upper body. if you're afraid, it tends to go more to your lower body. And then cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine are released. And so you can't really monitor those yourself. I can give you a little salivette to put in your mouth, and you can measure the amount of cortisol that's in your saliva. So we know those hormones move throughout the body. Just a little note that the tend and befriend response has been looked at a little bit in women. So if you hear that, it's this kind of, if there's a situation in which you can't fight or flee, then you may have to rely on the tending and befriending of whatever the threat is. Okay, so moving to just looking at the fight-flight response, or adding freeze in here, the ones in red are really the ones that you can control. So I recently had a baseball pitcher, a professional pitcher I worked with, who noticed that when he walked up to the mound, his mouth would get dry. Well, at first he didn't. I was watching his events, and I could see his tongue and his mouth moving around in the TV, and just wondered if he was kind of puckering and he was just kind of dry mouth, and he thought he was. So he actually used that indicator to know that when he walked on the mound and his mouth was getting dry, he would step off the mound and take a breath and make his mouth moist. I had him trained, go back to the hotel between games for the next weeks and try to salivate. See some of these monks in Tibet, and it's kind of gross, but they'll be doing standing meditation and drool will be coming out of their mouth. Their mouth gets so moist. Most of my undergraduates don't like to hear that. It doesn't encourage meditation or anything. Increased perspiration. So you notice that. Skeletal muscles, you can feel the pain, the tension. I don't know how many athletes over the decades I've worked with just did not know that their muscles in their neck and shoulders could be relaxed. They were just chronically tense. That's just what the state they thought they were in. And with practice, they're able to reduce that. Increase respiration rate, so you can monitor that. You can monitor heart rate now, by putting your fingers on, putting your finger on the back of your phone. They have lots of free apps. And some people can actually kind of feel their heart rate if they're more sensitive. And then the temperature of the hands, so the blood going from the extremities. Okay, so what we want to do is practice those, those techniques. And so what I like to do, I'll just take a quick moment. If there's a question, before I show you the progressive muscle relaxation, a short drill to use, and then I can have questions after if you have any. Link on the way. All right, so I can just I'll go through and have you do the exercise, and then we'll still hopefully be able to leave a few minutes and my screen, a few minutes to have other questions. So if you wouldn't mind, the progressive muscle relaxation, some of you may have done this. I have a number of length exercises. We usually start off with people doing 25 minutes laying down. We're going to do like a little bit more than 4 minutes of practice involving just the upper body, which tends to be really, good for rowers as well. Even though the legs you can relax, oftentimes it's in the upper body where tension is inhibiting performance. But if you wouldn't mind just kind of sitting back, if you're somewhere where you can lay down and listen to this, and I'll play the track and you can do the practice. I encourage you to practice rather than just listening, because it really is about getting the experience.
Close your eyes and focus on your breathing. Notice areas of your body that feel relaxed. Begin by tensing the muscles of your right arm by making a tight fist and simultaneously trying to bend and straighten your right arm. Now relax and let the tension flow out of your right arm. Moving to the left arm. Tense the muscles of your left arm by tightly squeezing your left fist and simultaneously trying to bend and straighten your left arm. Now relax and let the tension drain out of your left arm. Moving to your shoulders. Tense the muscles of your shoulders by raising your shoulders toward your ears. Now relax and let the tension drain out of the muscles of your shoulders. Again, tense the muscles of your shoulders by raising your shoulders toward your ears. Relax and let the tension drain out of the muscles of your shoulders. Moving to your upper back muscles. Tense the muscles of your upper back by pulling your shoulders down and toward each other. Now relax and let the tension drain out of your upper back muscles. Again, tense the muscles of your upper back by pulling your shoulders down and toward each other. Now relax and let the tension drain out of your upper back muscles. Moving now to the muscles of your face. Tense the muscles of your face by squinting your eyes tightly and wrinkling your nose. Now relax and let the tension drain out of the muscles of your face. Again, tense the muscles of your face by squinting your eyes tightly and wrinkling your nose. Now relax and let the tension drain out of the muscles of your face.
Good. When you're ready, you can just gently remember the room you're in and open your eyes. So this is just an example of one of the relaxation strategies that we use. There are other ones, the autogenic relaxation, where you imagine your body is heavy and warm and relaxed, like you would those parasympathetic responses, you know, in the autonomic nervous system. What's important and what most people don't realize, I think, without practicing, you know, in sports psychology, is that you need to learn to do it in a safe environment, like lying down. And then once you master it in 25 minutes, the long drill of that drill is all the body, then you should be able to get the same response in 15 and 10 and 5, and then be able to do that 4-minute exercise. And most people get to where they can just tense 2 muscles and relax, and they get the relaxation response almost immediately. And then just with your intention. So you just intend to relax. And you think about, you've probably heard of Pavlov and the stimulus control that you have with the dog. When you ring the bell, it salivates. Well, when you think of relaxing, your body relaxes. It's very powerful. And then you move to do it sitting and then standing and then in motion. And that's where you can carry that into the performance. The mistake people make a lot of times is to just want to use the relaxation drill when they need it, rather than training that response. So I really encourage you to think about that as I'm going to I'm going to forward through that little story. And then what I want to do aligned with this is practice the best performance imagery. So, we mentioned before that we want to create a state that's confident, focused, and calm. So the calm piece is learning that progressive muscle relaxation exercise. Athletes I work with will spend an hour or two a day doing that kind of training, just like the hours you spend in the boat and in the gym, those kind of things, until they get just a really amazing control over even small muscle changes in their body. And really elite athletes either get trained with somebody like me, or they fall on it themselves, where they're able to make that connection and they become elite. But regardless, there's the ability to turn on that relaxation response at will. Now, the best performance imagery is supposed to be the second part of that stool, which is to create confidence and positive emotions. And then we're going to finish off with an exercise just for focus. And so that'll be our three components, and they would be the things you'd put into a pre-performance routine. So if you just kind of sit back again, close your eyes, and we'll have you just go through the best performance imagery and see what comes up for you. Let the emotions come that are associated with those memories, because they're there for you. So just gently close your eyes. Take a few long, even breaths.
Recall a time in your life when you were performing at your very best. You may find that you can recall a complete performance or only parts of an exceptional performance. Either is okay. The important thing is to learn to recreate the mental, emotional, and physiological experience as intensely and authentically as possible. I want you to re-experience this perfect performance with all of your senses. Notice what you see. Notice what you hear. Notice what you smell. Notice any tastes that you remember. Notice what sensations were coming into your body from every sense. How do your clothes feel against your body? What emotions were you feeling? What is the energy in your body? How did the environment feel? Recall a time in your recall.
It looks like I had a little bit chopped off at the end of the imagery. I apologize for that. So I have you just kind of come back to where you are. Make a few comments about the imagery practice. This is something that really we spend a lot of time with performers, and given Corona time out, it's been really important for people to try to get close to the venues that they would practice in, and then use the imagery. And the key to using imagery is not visualization only, but to engage all of your senses. So you'll notice in there, it said, notice what you touch and smell and taste. So all of those points of contact you have with your sport need to be used, because we know that if you practice that, you can start turning on those emotions. But many people don't spend more than just a passing moment at doing this kind of practice. So we need to do the relaxation practice frequently, adding in at the same time the performance imagery, both as a way to harvest what you've done well. So you should, all of you should be able to describe to me how you think and act and feel when you're at your best. What do you do? What do you pay attention to? Just like an actor, I should be able to play you in the boat, right? Without knowing you, you should, but you can't just tell me, well, I'm in the zone, I'm focused, I'm confident. What does that look like? What does that feel like for you? And when you identify that, you should be able to write a script like an actor with all that information so that someone else could play you at your best. And that's the kind of work that we do, ultimately putting these things into a pre-performance routine, a routine that can be used to reproduce these responses. So with the time that I have, I'm just going to mention this and the last activity before we finish. So there's still a little bit of time for questions. So the purposeful performance of mental and physical actions that evoke positive or negative emotional states. So understanding when you're starting to go to the dark side, that is that you're starting to think in a particular way that you know is not related to the optimal performance state, that you're starting to feel and act. It may be that you just walk a little bit faster towards the boat when you're practicing it. Maybe how hard you grip the oar at the beginning. That may be the kind of cue for you. So it's one of those, there's one size fits none. So the principles, you kind of, I think, have the idea from what I've said, but tailoring it to each person is where the real kind of art comes in with the science. And that is, if I told everyone, and I was mentioning to Jessica, there's an old famous story of a sports psychologist messing up an Olympic gymnastics team in decades past by having everybody use the same pre-performance routines. So they said, you must walk up to the balance beam, say that I'm confident and calm and focused and I'm going to nail this. And for 2 out of the 12 people, that seemed to be the right routine. But for the others, it wasn't. So hopefully you take away from this that there's a textbook that I use in my class. It's called Personal Growth to Peak Performance. It's a pretty famous applied sports psychology book. And that captures that idea that it's personal growth. You have to become aware of the things that get you into that state. And the structure is around asking yourself, going back into the imagery, noticing what you think, how you feel, what you focus on, and how you behave. And then that makes that more predictable for you. It builds confidence in the athlete because when you know that you can turn it on, that's where you really get the most benefit. So I'm not going to show you this little clip that's here because it'll take a little time, but I wanted to show you just one example of a pre-performance routine, and then we'll wrap up. I'll just tell you about the last exercise. So you want to think about your performance, as I mentioned in the beginning of the little presentation today, as starting from that millisecond before you execute the first skill, right? And then working backwards from that. So this is an example I just had on the slide. I didn't have a rowing one to make for you, but I think you can extrapolate from this. But if you think about it, that, you know, someone's changing into their running clothes, they're at the venue, they're in the locker room, they have to like actually script out what they're going to think. They don't walk into a locker room and hope that the locker room makes them feel a certain way. They've already decided to find things that will make that the case. So they're changing and they put their shoes and socks on it. And so, you know, they're telling them, this is a great day to run. I feel energetic, light, I'm going to do well. And then the behaviors, we script the behaviors, you know, slowly and purposely put on the clothes. It's not I just put my clothes on. It's I put them on and I feel them on my body. And this is my signal that it's all starting to come together. And I can't wait to get out there on the track. And then focusing on how good that feels, right? And then some more minutes before that or after that, as you're approaching, you know, warming up and stretching. I'm loose and warm. Imagine the course, and I imagine the time I'll achieve. You know, so there's the imagery with the thoughts, and then long, slow breathing. Shorter breath to increase energy. If energy's kind of low, there's this myth that you just have to be relaxed. And everyone who's a performer knows that it's the optimal state you're trying to get to, not just be relaxed. Fast moving to create more positive emotions, maybe dialing it up and down and focusing only on muscles being stretched and images of the run to be performed. And then maybe right before the start, going, you know, I'm ready, I'm committed, I trust my body, standing still, like a fighting rooster. I didn't read you that story, but it's kind of a famous Chinese Lao Tzu story about a rooster that just at the end is so calm that all the other roosters run away. Because how could you be this calm under this level of pressure? And some people like those images, and that's one that they could use. And then kind of focusing on the starting line. And then I think we won't have time to go through this today, but we would do a focusing drill like sitting meditation, where you sit up nice and straight, close your eyes, open them a little bit, focus on a point out in front, and then start to bring all your attention into the present after you've gotten relaxed and you feel the positive emotions from the imagery and the self-talk. You bring all those together in kind of a meditative focus, and then you're ready to, you know, execute your skills. And so oftentimes with meditation, people will say, I sit in meditation. Meditation sitting is fine as a focusing practice, but for athletes, they need to be able to do lots more self-regulation. It's not one state. They need to be able to turn that state on and off and up and down to match the demands of their activity. Okay, so I will kind of stop there. I was trying to watch the time. I know we started about 10 after, but it's a few minutes after already. So questions, comments?
Hi, Glenn.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. This is so fantastic. I could probably take your class over and over again and just love it. I want to know so much.
That's great.
First of all, the relaxation technique was amazing. I don't think I've felt that good in a very long time. I guess, let's see, one of my questions is, I have had that experience of, you know, like feeling, I guess, like you said, in the zone, kind of confident, ready to go. But how would you suggest taking that experience into maybe a new activity? Like, you know, for instance, I've had success as an athlete in the past, but now I'm older and I just came back to rowing about a year ago, not feeling so good. Like, how do you, you know, not being like this crazy trained athlete right now, what are your suggestions there?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think, yeah, as we age and we have different activities we're involved in, we have to, I think a lot of that comes from like setting the right expectations, no? So when we do the goal setting, the big component of goal setting, and most people don't do it very well or spend a lot of time on it, is breaking down all it into little pieces. Right? It's like having a meal. You don't eat the whole meal. You cut it up into pieces and you do. But for us, it's really important that you develop like a hierarchy of skills. So that way you can be successful at the level that you are. And then you can go to the next one. And then then I think you have to adjust the imagery and the practice to that level. Because many people don't. They just imagine that they're like world class, whatever it is, and then next week they'll be that. And that's just not true. We know that the closer you get the imagery to what your current level is, the better the imagery works.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to go, I always think of 5%. If you want to imagine yourself 5% better in the imagery than you are, then it will move you that way. And there's just a lot of things out there that say, just shoot for the stars, imagine you're the greatest, you can lift the most weight. And your body doesn't believe that, right? It just feels fake. So that I would suggest that is just trying to actually have several levels of success you want to get to, and then focus on the one that you're at and moving it a little bit forward.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's great. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
It's hard to do, but we have to keep doing it. If we have a setback, I do that with the athletes that are injured. They're in the training room and now they can't, move as well for the next 4 months. So they have to come back to what they can do, keeping in mind that they'll get there, and then reevaluating those kind of things. The important thing is not just to focus on outcomes and goals. That's a big thing. Is the process as well. Outcomes are really important. Nobody does their sport to just do it. That's crazy. People, coaches say, just focus on the process. No, I want to win the event. But coming back to the process is what gets us out of that all or nothing thinking, and where we can just really become aware right now. And I want to move that little bit further forward. I had a professional dancer that I worked with, and she said they always imagine stretching the distance of a pill. I don't know why they use medication, but like a pill, that was the distance. And she had that in her mind, that I'm not stretching very far. Well, geez, if most of us increased our flexibility by the distance of a pill 10 times, over a year or two, that would be a lot. That'd be a huge amount of flexibility. You wouldn't expect that. So she had that in her mind, rather than when I see a ballet dancer, I'm thinking, wow, I've got to be way out there. So anyway, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, super helpful.
Glenn, thanks very much for that. I really like the relaxation technique with the tension first and then the relaxation. Could I just ask you about any tricks or suggestions for if you're in mid-race and you're at that point where your body feels as though it's going anaerobic and you know that you're sort of just about tipping over the edge, heart rate's a bit too high, pressure's on, you've got another boat next to you and you don't want to lighten off, but are there any ways of controlling that? It seems to me that at that point in time, probably what happens to me anyway, is that a lot of muscle energy and mental energy goes into trying to control that, and not enough into the rowing, actually.
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's really interesting. So there's this kind of, I don't know, it seems like it's contradictory to accept things that we want to control. So there is this idea, and in modern psychology now, there's actually therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, where you train people to accept what they're experiencing. And by accepting it, that struggle, there's a little metaphor we use, like a rope. So we've got a rope, you're holding one end, I'm holding the other. And on my end, I'm all the things you don't want to experience. The thoughts you don't like, emotions, life problems. And there's a cliff between us. And I'm trying to pull you over the cliff. And then you dig in. And then I ask, someone in the audience asks, well, what else could you do? And right, the first time you're like, well, I could bend my knees and grit my teeth. And then as you imagine, after you ask it 3 or 4 times, people go, well, I guess I could let go of the rope and not keep pulling on it. And so it doesn't make your problems go away, because they're still there. You still got that, but it reduces that the amount of energy. I think you're right, exactly right, that it's not even the things that we do. It's not even the fact that we have negative feelings and thoughts. It's what we do to try to get rid of them. So we get a bit anxious. Instead of going, yeah, I'm anxious and I can pull just as hard being anxious and being worried about the outcome, I can still just pull. I don't need it. But if you go, no, I got to get rid of those feelings, like they're coming on. It's that kind of conflict that I've seen in people that actually makes it escalate. So if there can be this message of acceptance, like when that comes up, and you have to practice it, right? And trust yourself that if you do let go, you won't get worse, which is our real fear, right? Like if I don't really gut it out, maybe I won't try at all. But what happens is that people start becoming a bigger container and they can perform. And because you can't always control your responses, I didn't have time to talk about that, but I work with people who, you still need to throw the pitch in front of 40,000 people, even if your heart beats fast. You can still throw the pitch. You can do what you want to do, even if your body, which is now I'm giving you, it sounds like the opposite message of control. And I have a talk that I give sometimes that's called, I gave it at Stanford, a meeting not long ago, to control or not to control your experience. That's the question, right? And it's both. You want to control what you can, but then you want to actually practice that attitude that acceptance will give me, which I would argue is still a matter of control, right? It's like a tricky way to control. You tell yourself that you're going to give up control. And that's a way of thinking about it. But I think that is for what you're saying. And the other piece is, is preparing for that, obviously. Preparing when that comes, that because what you describe is, I think, the experience of every athlete at a high level, right? It's that if I try extra hard, I remember as a tennis player, I'm like, if I keep trying this hard, I'm going to lose. Like, keep trying to get the ball, and I need to let go because the other guy is, I need to let go and execute, or else I'm going to lose. And then you're like, I can't let go. So you hit it in and then you lose the point. Or I had a 10K runner, a Stanford kid, and, number 3 in the country. And he ran that, 24 laps, the 10K. He would get to the last lap every time and he'd lose to the same guy in 100 meters. After he'd run 10K, he'd lose in 100 meters. And in the boat's the same thing, right? But what did he do? He realized that as he turned the corner, he'd start to try that little bit harder and he'd lose that 1 or 2 steps. And he'd only lose by a couple of steps. So he started to tell himself when that happened that, no, I'm going to let it go and see what happens. I'm going to lose anyway. If I just grip in, and then he's able to find another way. He was actually able to feel his shoulders come down and go a little bit more in the flow. It took a few races for him to do it. But anyway, that's what I would suggest.
Thank you. Thanks. That's some nice ideas. That's good.
Yeah, it's just, it's infuriating too. I know so many people, you're like, to let go. And even in our everyday life, right? We know that if you just accept our experience, that's why this therapy is called ACT. It's called acceptance and commitment. So you don't just accept and not do anything. You accept and then keep following your path. Mm-hmm. You just don't gut out. I mean, we're always trained to gut it out and go through and, push through. And at the higher level, you really have to kind of be in another state where you don't really care if you win or lose. I mean, how many athletes have you seen, yourself maybe, where you just get in the zone, you're like, whatever. And then when you win, you're like, yeah, I won. But if you get into that mode before, then you don't win. It's a weird kind of head fake that we have to do, that, we don't really care. We're just going to engage and let our body do it, trust our mind. It's all going to happen. And then afterwards we can rejoice. Mm-hmm. But thanks for the question.
Anybody else? I have a question, Glenn. I was curious if you had any literature that you'd recommend reading that would sort of just enable the healthy psychology around being a middle-aged athlete, so to speak, and the ebbs and flows in terms of that.
Yeah, actually, I don't have anything that kind of like a trade book or something. I think the sports psych book that I mentioned is, if you're interested in those techniques. So if you have a chance, to any of you, to read that little paper I wrote some years ago, kind of more popular paper about the steps in the mental training process that Jessica sent out. They kind of go into those components in different chapters in the Peak Performance, the Personal Growth to Peak Performance by Williams. It's in Arizona. I think it's in the 8th edition now. But there's a chapter on goal setting, and there's a chapter on imagery, and then there's even an assessment of imagery. because we do assessments where you have to do a number of vignettes and you see how well you can control the images, how much emotion, how much you can, see and hear and taste and touch. But that's the one. If I think of something else, or if I look around,
Okay.
I know there are lots of things that are more on the physical, right? That's what I need. I have a sabbatical next semester. I need to write something. Maybe I'll do something like that. That would be kind of, because I do think it is a little different. You just have to scale things differently, I think, when you're, because it could just trigger all the frustration. I mean, I know I have the same thing. I teaching my son tennis, and but I'm like, no, I could have done this and this, or I do actually go and do that because I have all the motor memories, and then my arm hurts the next day because I know how to move. I was surprised the other day. I was doing speed work with him, and I'm way faster than him and he's 13, but it's because I can stop and start quick because I have so many years of it, even though I'm older. But then I can't walk, and that's the kind of thing. So I think then that doesn't help, right? So then I have to go, no, okay, let's scale back. And then you have to work on the patience and the self-talk around that. And then the idea is to build up to kind of, personal best.
Yeah.
But lots of challenges with the shelter in place, the Corona things for people. And then Jessica asked me to mention a little bit something about that. And I think the main thing is that staying engaged. So just like I think about like the injured athletes we work with, they need to show up at practice. They need to imagine what they're doing. They need to keep working on the mental training and any part of the physical training they can until we get back to a little more normal.
Nice. Cool. Well, thank you so much. Any other last questions before we wrap it up tonight?
No, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well,
most of you in the North Bay, except for the Eastern Australia, or Western Australia, still mess up the sides of the country. It's sad, no?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Nice.
So
Okay.
maybe we'll connect up sometime around Sonoma State. I'm usually driving down to the South Bay I teach at Stanford a quarter a year, and then I'm at Sonoma State the rest of the time. But maybe we will cross paths up in the North Bay.
Terrific.
Good. Sounds really good. Cool.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you again, Glenn.
You're welcome. All the best. Keep training and being positive.
Yes.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.